I'm Joe from As the Joe Flies.
And I'm Leslie from Trips with Tykes.
And welcome back to Disney Deciphered. So we have done our Genie Plus 101 and 201 episodes for Walt Disney World, but we thought it was time to do Genie Plus 102, which is our Genie Plus 101 for Disneyland. Are you confused enough? TLDR, Disneyland, Genie Plus, what do you need to know? That's what we're going to be doing today. Before we get to that, we want to thank some of our newest patrons, Stephen C. and Rachel M. Thank you so much for supporting us. You can check us out on patreon.com/Disney Deciphered if you'd like to support the podcast and receive bonus content there. But yeah, Genie Plus, it's the same, but it's so different at Disneyland. Right, Leslie?
Yes, and I'm just going to say I told you so, because I called this from the beginning. I thought these were going to be very different products. I know.
You can't say you told me so. I mean, MaxPass was working so well, and I think the real pat ourselves on the back is like we were like Genie Plus will probably look like MaxPass looked at Disneyland when it starts, and yeah, that's more or less. It's not exactly the same, but the spirit of MaxPass lives on through Genie Plus at Disneyland. So let's hop right into it. If you kind of know absolutely nothing about Genie Plus, we suggest you go back to our Genie Plus 101 episode. That is episode 256 back on your feed on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere. But yeah, let's get into, what makes Disneyland different. And, how do you want to do this, Leslie?
All right, well, let's just start for folks who aren't going to go back and listen to that whole episode. Really quickly, what is Genie Plus and what is it at Disneyland?
All right, well, I will handle this since you're going to be doing a lot of the talking today. So Genie Plus is Disney's cut the line paid strategy. So you're going to pay a fee and it's going to, I would say at Disneyland, actually significantly reduce your wait time. I mean, at Disney World, it reduces it as well. But at Disneyland, you really are going to get some much shorter wait times because you're going to go in after you're using Genie Plus through a shorter line called the Lightning Lane. And, that's going to get you more or less right on the ride. Ideally, you're going to wait less than 5 minutes to get on the attraction. I do think at Disneyland, sometimes that is a little bit more of an issue than it is at Walt Disney World. But bottom line, pay a fee. For the majority of the attractions, you are going to be able to go into the Lightning Lane using the process that we're going to talk about. Not to be confused with individual Lightning Lanes, where for 3 attractions at Disneyland, you're going to pay separately to enter the Lightning Lane there. That would be Radiator Springs Racers, Rise of the Resistance, and help me out, Leslie.
Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. It's new, yes, so you're forgiven. Yes.
Yes, I knew it wasn't Web Slingers anymore. And so those 3 attractions are a separate purchase that you need to use. We're not going to talk about that today because we're going to focus on how to maximize Genie Plus at Disneyland and how to use Genie Plus at Disneyland if you're not totally sure, even if you're familiar with it at Disney World, because it is different.
Indeed. So this is a good segue for us to talk about just sort of high level, the major differences between Disneyland and Disney World. And we'll get into the nitty gritty as we sort of talk about a step by step. But these are the things that you sort of high level need to be aware of. First, the price is different at Disneyland, and we'll get into what exactly it costs. Second, how you can buy it is different at Disneyland. There are more options actually at Disneyland. Third, when you can book attractions with Genie Plus, when you can book those Lightning Lane reservation return times, that's different. When you can park hop is different at Disneyland, so that affects your Genie Plus strategy a lot more. How many rides you can realistically get done with Genie Plus in a single day is different at Disneyland, and spoiler alert, it's better. And finally, how many rides at Disneyland that are not on Genie Plus, that's also different because almost every attraction at Disney World is on Genie Plus. I mean, there's a few exceptions at Disney World like People Mover, but there are a lot of exceptions at Disneyland, and that also affects your overall park touring strategy and how and when you use Genie Plus. But at the very least, if you've used Genie Plus at Disneyland, at Disney World, then the interface is going to look the same on the app. It's going to feel the same. So you'll have some familiarity. It's not like a complete brand new learning curve. So that's at least some consolation, I hope.
Yeah, and it's going to feel the same technically, but as we get into this, you'll see that the spirit of Genie Plus at Disneyland feels a lot different and a lot more positive overall. We keep saying this, in general, the only time you're going to regret purchasing Genie Plus at Disneyland is if for some reason you happen to show up on a very low crowd day. In general, Genie Plus, if you are there to like ride as many attractions as possible, is going to be a pretty good investment of your hard-earned dollars at Disneyland. Speaking of which, let's get to the steps that you're going to take. And, I can take this first one, so the first step, of course, as always, is going to be purchasing Genie Plus. And this is one of the big differences between Walt Disney World and Disneyland. For Disneyland, you can still buy your Genie Plus in advance with your ticket. As of recording, that is $25 per person per day. But when you buy your Disneyland ticket, you can add Genie Plus onto it now. You cannot, however, buy your tickets and then add to it later. So you got to make that decision right when you're buying your Disneyland tickets. Do you want to add Genie Plus or not? And if yes, then that's going to be $25 per person per day. The other way that you can purchase Genie Plus is in the app, but again, different from Walt Disney World. At Walt Disney World, you can start buying it at midnight. That is not true. I'm going to say again, that is not true at Disneyland. At Disneyland, you can only purchase Genie Plus once you've scanned into the park in the morning. So you have to be inside the park, and then that's where it becomes similar to Disney World. It is variable pricing. For the variable pricing, we've seen it go as high as $30, which is still lower than what we've seen at Walt Disney World. But of course, that can always change. And you're going to do the same. Purchase Genie Plus today for X dollar per guest banner. You're going to start from there, or, go to the tip board and you can be directed to buying it. Now, one thing I'm not sure about, Leslie, I know you can buy Genie Plus for your friends and family at Disneyland, but do they all have to have entered the park before you do that?
Yes, they all have to have scanned into the park. So what you do is you link their tickets in your Disneyland app, and things work different at Disneyland. There's not the sort of same friends and family linking that you have, permanently where you're associated with your kids. Each time you're going in and buying a new ticket, you're linking that ticket to the apps that you have. So, and you can link one ticket to multiple different people's apps. So don't worry about that part. But yeah, so go ahead and link everybody in your party, and everybody has to scan into the park to be able to start booking Genie Plus. So somebody doesn't get to sleep in the family.
Yep. But that's kind of how it is. So what is the next step? We've purchased it. What's next?
So we've talked about cost. So what's next is making that first Genie Plus Lightning Lane reservation. So after you've entered a park, this is not, again, at 7 a.m. like it is at Walt Disney World. You cannot do this while you're sitting in your hotel in your PJs, et cetera, et cetera. Get up, get your butt into the park, book a ride. So what you do, same as what you do at Walt Disney World. You go to the tip board, you scroll, you look at the attractions that are available, and then it gives you the option to select who you want to make the Lightning Lane for, and you just click through. I mean, it's very, very simple in terms of how it works. That's not, I guess, really the hard part. What's really the hard part is figuring out what to book first and when and why and what return time you ideally want. So just like at Walt Disney World, there are certain attractions that go faster, that book up faster, and you want to prioritize in the morning those attractions that are going to be harder to get or run out later in the day. Generally speaking, but this isn't like Disney World. This isn't like pushing the button as fast as you possibly can because the return time is going to be like 6 p.m. first thing in the morning. I mean, this is much more in real time. So generally the rule of thumb is you want to book at Disneyland. Indiana Jones usually is one of the most popular attractions. Space Mountain is another popular one. Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. And then when it's running, and usually when it's new in the fall, Haunted Mansion Holiday is also super popular. And then at California Adventure, Web Slingers is still popular because it's still newish in Avengers Campus, Toy Story Midway Mania, and then Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, and sometimes Soarin' as well. So those are kind of like, that's kind of the hierarchy that you have to have in your mind. But what you're going to see when you book those attractions, when you scan into the park at Rope Drop first thing, the return time is going to be instantaneous. It's not going to be hours and hours and hours later. So you don't want to book that ride and go straight to redeem that, because you're going to be wasting the most important part of the day at Disneyland, which is Rope Drop. And that's when those standby lines for all those attractions that don't have Genie Plus, that's when those lines are going to be shorter. And so I kind of ignore Genie Plus for the first hour or so of my Disneyland day. Like, I'll make a booking, I'll have it sit there, but I'm not working it in the first hour of the day.
Do you book and modify, like, just to get the time a little later? Like, I can imagine that, after rope drop, hour 15 minutes, like if my Genie Plus return time is immediate, I could probably make it after an hour and 15 minutes, but I could still maybe do a little bit better after rope drop. So do you just modify it to something that, like, maybe ends 2 hours after the park opens?
I don't even modify it. I just wait for a little bit to book something, or I plan that I'm going to ride that attraction at the very end of the 1 hour window, or maybe even using the 15-minute late grace period that you get at Disneyland and at Disney World. So I'm not even trying to game it that much. You don't have to think about it that hard. So usually I'll just scan into the park. I'll make my way down Main Street. I'll be standing at the rope, and then I'll book something and plan to redeem it, an hour or more later.
I mean, it's truly wild how different it is. And so it bears repeating in case, I know people are listening, they're washing the dishes, their kids talking. We'll say it again. Like, you do not book nobody books their Genie Plus Lightning Lane return time until after they've entered the park. And because of that, even with the popular rides, let's take Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway at Hollywood Studios, by 8 a.m., it's already returning at 2 p.m. or something like that, 3 p.m. So, like, by way of example, Space Mountain is both at Walt Disney World and Disneyland. Well, you might see, after at 7:30 a.m. or something like that, Space is already, Space isn't too bad at Walt Disney World, but you might see it returning at like 11 a.m. or something like that. Because starting at 7 a.m., people have started making their Space Mountain Genie Plus Lightning Lane return times. Whereas at Disneyland, since no one can book a Lightning Lane return time until they get into the park, when you get in at 8 a.m. or whenever, Space is returning at 8:05 a.m. or something like that. So it just really makes things different. And I mean, it's mind-blowing to me, but it makes sense. Don't think about Genie Plus during rope drop, because at Disneyland there's a lot more attractions that you need to rope drop because there is no Genie Plus.
Exactly. It's actually really great because your brain usually isn't woken up and you're still working on that first caffeine of the day at that point. So you don't have to think too hard. So this is really where Disneyland, you get to not spend your time as fully tethered to your phone, which is great. I mean, you'll get a little more tethered to it as the day goes on, and we'll keep getting into that.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to not be tethered. Here's where we insert our quick reminder in case you didn't listen to episode 256, our Genie Plus 101 episode for Disney World. Just like at Disney World, you can only book each attraction once per day with Genie Plus. So you may be able to use the Lightning Lane a couple times, via breakdowns or things like that. But in terms of what you're actually booking, you can only book each attraction once. All right, so we've gotten into the park. What happens next with Genie Plus at Disneyland?
So you've made your first Genie Plus Lightning Lane reservation, and now you actually want to ride it after doing a lot of other things that don't have Genie Plus and making use of things like rope drop. So now you're ready to ride the attraction. So and this is where things kind of branch. And I'm going to start with sort of the most traditional use case at Disneyland. Most of the time, what you're going to be doing at Disneyland is you're going to be booking a Lightning Lane, riding the attraction, immediately booking another Lightning Lane. And that's going to be because you're booking return times that are very close in. So you're making a booking, and as fast as you can walk to that attraction, your window is starting and you're ready to ride. So what you do is you simply book and you scan into that attraction, and then the next step is you book your next Lightning Lane. So as soon as you scan into the attraction, and sometimes you do have to tap twice to scan into the attraction, like at Space Mountain, there's a place where you have to do that. But most of the time at Disneyland, there's just one tap point. And what you want to do is you want to immediately make your next Lightning Lane booking. And you want to do that even before you enter a show or a ride building, because the Wi-Fi at Disneyland, there are a lot of dead spots, and there's a lot of dead spots for cell data as well. So you may not have service. And if you're going into a ride where you're going to be in a building for half an hour, like a ride like Soarin' might be that, then you're losing that time. You're not able to book your next Lightning Lane. So I always tap and immediately pull over, book my next Lightning Lane, and then keep going, because that's going to be the most efficient use of your day.
The nice thing about Disneyland is, whenever we talk about Disney World, I'm always finding myself explaining the 2-hour rule, which gets confusing because the 2-hour rule doesn't kick in until the park opens, blah, blah, blah. Well, at Disneyland, even though the 2-hour rule still exists, you don't have to worry about that. Now, for me, in my ideal for Disneyland, I am ride, book, ride, book. I'm sorry, I should have booked first. Book, ride, book, ride, book, ride. And I'm just keep going with my Genie Plus until, lunchtime or something like that. But maybe sometimes, maybe it's a super busy day and the attraction you really want to ride is returning, in the afternoon or something like that, and you're booking in the morning. So here's where we talk about, the next branch of what's going on with Genie Plus. So what do we do? Let's re-explain the 2-hour rule in the Disneyland context.
All right, so the 2-hour rule is if the attraction that you want to ride has a return time that is more than 2 hours from the time you're making the booking, then you are allowed to make your next booking 2 hours later. So say it's 11 a.m., I want to book Space Mountain, but Space Mountain is returning a return time at 3 p.m. That's 4 hours later. Then I get to book my next attraction at 1 if I make that booking. So 11 a.m., I'm booking for 3, but I also then get to make another booking for another attraction at 1. So that's something to keep in mind as the day goes on. And especially that'll happen if you're trying to book a super popular attraction where those return times do start creeping later. This may not happen at all for you if you're using the right strategy and you're booking a ride like Indiana Jones early. You're never going to hit the 2-hour rule with Indiana Jones. But if you're booking Indiana Jones at 2 p.m., you might hit that 2-hour rule. So it's important to know it, but this is where you start to be able to do a little bit of the stacking. And the time that I use this the most is usually on my lunch break, or if I go back to my hotel for a mid-afternoon break. I'm using that 2-hour rule. I'm often doing something where I book out the farthest attraction and then I'm backfilling that space as time goes along. So maybe at noon, I'm sitting at lunch and it's a really busy day. And Indiana Jones says, goodness, a 6 p.m. return time. I'm going to book that first, and then I'm going to backfill for 4 p.m. or something like that later in the afternoon. So that's just something and that keeps you going, that keeps your schedule filled, and it prevents you from being in a situation where you have like 3 attractions all at the same time and then hours where you have nothing to do. So just think about sort of the spreadsheet in your brain. Maybe I'm the only person who has that, Joe. I don't know.
You're not the only one. You're not the only one. And yeah, I think you call that reverse stacking on our Genie Plus 201 episode. If you're going to be gone for a while, take the latest one first and then work your way forward so that they're all stacked around the same time. And just a reminder that you can have multiple Genie Plus Lightning Lane return times in the same window. It doesn't matter if they overlap. And that's what stacking is, when you have a couple in a row so you can go through it easily. So I think that covers kind of the main steps that you're going to take while using Genie Plus at Disneyland. Now, for our Disney World episode, we did a quick FAQ. And so, Leslie, I think it makes sense to do that again.
Yeah, let's give it a go because some of the answers are different, of course.
Before we get to the FAQs, want to do a quick reminder and plug that we are on YouTube now. Check us out on youtube.com/@DisneyDeciphered. We will have some screenshots and stuff there if you want a visual cue to what we are talking about. Also, you can find our work on the internet. Leslie, where can we find your work on the internet?
Tripswithtykes.com and @TripsWithTykes everywhere on social media. What about you, Joe?
You can find me at AsAJoeFlies. And then, of course, if you're looking to book a Disney World or Disneyland vacation, you can email me, josephchung@travelmation.net, and I can help you out. Okay, so I'll ask the questions, you give the answers. So Let's start with, what attractions are covered. I always severely get this number wrong, but I'm looking at the notes, but I'll give you the glory, Leslie. What attractions are covered and how many?
To be fair, I did have to look this up as we were preparing for this episode because it does change. Right now, as of the time we're recording this, there are 20 attractions that are covered by Genie Plus, in addition to those 3 that we said are covered by individual Lightning Lane. And on Genie Plus, there are 12 in Disneyland Park and there are 8 in California Adventure. But the most important thing to note is that a lot of attractions at Disneyland simply don't have any Lightning Lanes, paid or Genie Plus ones. And that includes really popular attractions like Pirates of the Caribbean, Jungle Cruise, pretty much every Fantasyland dark ride like Peter Pan and Toad and Pinocchio, things like that. And then also many of the rides along Pixar Pier, like Inside Out, Emotional Whirlwind, and Golden Zephyr, and those kind of sort of smaller pier attractions. So this is really important. And also, I should say, Mater's and Luigi's in Cars Land. So quite a lot of attractions that are not included. So you really have to think about your strategy more generally, because Genie Plus just isn't going to get you over the finish line with all the attractions, but it is going to get you a ton of attractions in a day. It'll get you all of the major thrill rides.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good to know because, and just for those of you who have never been to Disneyland, it's just because there's less real estate. They don't have the line space to have like a secondary lightning lane line. And, the one that's really burns people, if you don't realize that it's not on Genie Plus, is something like Peter Pan, right? You can't ride Peter Pan without Genie Plus, which is why, you'll see a line going through the Disneyland castle right after rope drop as people are queuing up to rope drop Peter Pan. Quick aside, that does mean, though, that the lines without Genie Plus are going to move faster. Just a reminder about how lines work. If Genie Plus exists and people are going through the lightning lane, well, if you're in the standby line, all those people are going before you. Whereas, with a traditional queue, all the people who are going to go in before you, outside of like DAS or a rider switch or something like that, which of course doesn't matter for rider switch doesn't matter for stuff like Peter Pan at Fantasyland. All the people in front of you are going through like a normal line. All right, the next question is, when can you use your lightning lane? This is pretty much the same as Walt Disney World, right?
It is. You can use it 5 minutes early and 15 minutes late. I mean, there is a little bit of leeway for cast members to help you, but I think it's always safest. The computer will recognize always 5 minutes early and 15 minutes late.
Got it. And then the next one, I'll answer this. Can you modify your lightning lanes, your lightning lane return times? Yes, you can. It will not reset your 2-hour clock if you're on one of those 2-hour clocks. We went over that extensively in our previous Genie Plus episodes. Always modify, never cancel. All right, next question for you. Can you have 2 lightning lanes booked at the same time? Yes, we answered this already, but like I said, not everyone's listening all the time. So Leslie, tell us again.
Yes, you can. So this is the staff afternoon stacking that we talked about, and I think it's actually a really great strategy. Definitely be sure to use that time that you're taking a break to eat or rest or whatever, but you got to get yourself into the park to do that, because stacking strategy at Disney World is different.
Afternoon snacking, I'm definitely going to leave that in, Leslie, because we're recording around your lunchtime. So sorry about that. Next
Freudian
question.
slip. I don't know.
Indeed. Do you have to buy Genie Plus to buy the individual lightning lanes? I still get questions about this all the time, so this is good to answer. You do not need to buy Genie Plus to buy the individual lightning lanes, which again at Disneyland are Rise of the Resistance, Radiator Springs Racers, and Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. So those 3 you pay for separately to enter the lightning lane. The other 20 attractions that have lightning lanes, you get to via purchasing Genie Plus. So remember, Genie Plus and individual lightning lanes, not the same thing. Theoretically, you could pay for 3 things in a given day. You're only allowed to buy 2 individual lightning lanes, and then you can buy Genie Plus on top of that. So those are 3 things that you can pay. All right, park hopping, very different at Disneyland in the sense that it starts way earlier at 11 a.m. So how does Genie Plus work with park hopping at Disneyland?
So the same rules apply, even though the park hopping time is 3 hours earlier. I'm so sorry to Disney World people. We got ours moved back to 11 a.m. fairly recently. So you have to wait until the return time in the park that you're going to hop to is 11 a.m. or later to be able to book the ride. So first thing in the morning, if you enter Disneyland and the return times for everything are 8 a.m., say, you can't be booking Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout because the return time is too early at that point. So you just have to sort of watch and wait. But because of the how everything works now, you don't really have to plan for the hop in that great of detail. I mean, I guess if you're going to book and really want to hit all of the thrill attractions, you need to, pay a little bit more attention and make sure you're maybe booking the one for the hop right away. But, again, loosey-goosey at Disneyland. Don't worry about it so much. Don't stress. minute to minute. And like minute to minute is not going to make a difference. Say, I do set alarms on my phone at Disneyland, but if I'm 5 minutes late for an alarm, okay, my return time's 5 minutes later. Okay, it's not so bad.
Got it. Now, maybe start stressing out if you think you're about to miss your Lightning Lane return time. What should you do in this instance? What do you do if you're either miss your Lightning Lane return time or think you're about to miss it?
Yeah, if you're about to miss a Lightning Lane return time, if you know that things are just not working out, you're stuck in a line, or, kids having a meltdown or something like that, you really should make sure that you modify, like we said, and modify before that 1 hour window expires. But if you don't remember to do that and your Lightning Lane time window has passed and your 15-minute grace period has passed, you can still go into the app and cancel that ride. You used to be that you lost the chance to ride that attraction. It counted as your use of the attraction. Now that's no longer the case. Thank goodness. You just have to go into the app and you have to cancel it, and then you can rebook that ride right away. It doesn't count against you. But one thing it does count against you for is it actually resets your 2 hour clock. So you sort of have missed that chance. And again, this isn't like as make or break as it is in Disney World, because when you reset that clock at Disney World, that's maybe one of your 4 Genie Plus slots for the day is gone. And you have many more slots than that at Disneyland to fill. But again, I still think it's better. Modify before your time is up if you know you're not going to make it. Don't wait until you're in a position that you have to cancel, because you can't modify once the window's over.
All right, so we are at the point where it's getting a little bit more fun, possibly. I actually learned this the other day when I had a client at Disneyland and a ride broke down on them. We've talked about multiple experience passes before, but we're talking about again because they're so powerful. And how's it different at Disneyland?
So generally, refresher for those of you who don't know, if a ride breaks down and you have a Lightning Lane for it, eventually in the app, not necessarily instantaneously, that reservation time will revert or convert into a multiple experience pass that's good at several or many attractions, depending upon what the booking was for. But at Disneyland, there's a bonus. And that is that these multiple experience passes are good at many attractions that don't have Genie Plus. So it's sort of like an extra sort of behind the curtain fast pass. And it's a little bit tricky to figure out where to use them. You just have to go up to a cast member and say, hey, I have a multiple experience pass and I want to use it to ride Pirates, and they'll, send you into the right place. But I mean, these are great. These are really, really great, because this is a chance for you to ride a ride like Pirates. Maybe if you missed it in the morning when the standby line is short, and then, you can use something and be able to sort of squeeze something extra in. And then you, of course, get the chance to book a new attraction right away because of that multiple experience pass converting. So I really like it, but something you do have to keep in mind is, just like at Disney World, these are tiered. So if the attraction that you had a Lightning Lane for is not super popular, you won't have as many choices with the multiple experience pass about where to use it. And you never can get a multiple experience pass that's good at Peter Pan. That's always blacked out, as well as every individual Lightning Lane attraction. But if Space Mountain, something like that, breaks down, you will get a multiple experience pass good for everything except Peter Pan and the 3 paid Lightning Lane rides. It's great.
So my turn to not have been listening for a second there. It is the list of the attractions on my Disney experience. Maybe you didn't say it, but I wasn't listening. So
I didn't say it. You're good.
Oh man. That is the edit that I will leave in. My embarrassment for the day. So yeah, it should be said that then I can say this then, that on your app, when you get your multiple experience pass, it will say the attractions, and it will also list those non-Genie Plus attractions like Pirates, like Snow White, not Peter Pan. So that's always super helpful, because otherwise, you would have no idea what you could use it for.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something that Disney obviously changes over time. So there's no published list in advance. You don't really know that, like, hey, if I get space, it's going to convert into these rides. But I take a lot of screenshots of what I see so that I sort of know generally the data points and try to share that. But this does change over time. I mean, Web Slingers used to be blacked out from everything, but of course now it's not.
And then, of course, even if an attraction is sold out for the day, if you happen to get a multiple experience pass and that attraction is covered by that multiple experience pass, then you can use the Genie Plus Lightning Lane for that, even if you didn't get it. So that's always a nice, thing to happen when you thought that you weren't going to be able to use a Lightning Lane for a certain attraction. All right, wrapping up these FAQs. One question that might not be obvious, and I wouldn't have been sure about unless you brought it up, Leslie. When you are at Disneyland for early entry, so the park hasn't officially opened, but you have tapped in, are you still able to book Genie Plus Lightning Lane return times at that point?
Yes, this is an important, good question to ask. Yes, as soon as you scan into the park, whether that's because you're in an on-property hotel and you got in early and you're heading off to, do the early entry rides, yes, you can book. Or even if you're in an off-property hotel, Disney starts scanning people into the park well before official park opening time so that they can queue at the rope. You can start booking then too. So this isn't like a park open moment. It's literally as soon as you physically get your ticket scanned, and that often is even earlier. So I guess that's something to keep in mind if you're going like on Christmas Day or something like that, where it's going to be really, really busy, that this is all the more reason that you want to get in and start getting a move on with just your strategy generally, and not necessarily your Genie booking strategy, but your riding strategy more generally.
All right, and our last question relates to one of our favorite techniques at Walt Disney World, which is to stack lightning lanes for a late arrival. Like I land in Florida at 1 p.m. and I have a bunch of lightning lanes stacked. Can you do that at Disneyland? That would be
Nope, I'm sorry. And this is a big pain for me because sometimes I want to take like a 6 a.m. flight from my home in Northern California, arrive to Disneyland mid-morning, something like that, and there's no way to do it. And you would still be okay if you're doing something like that, buying Genie Plus at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m., and there still would be plenty left to make it worth your while. But if you're arriving later in the day, I don't really think that Genie Plus is a great value in those kind of situations. But what might be a good value in those situations is something like a paid lightning lane, because a lot of the attractions, don't run out immediately, even Rise of the Resistance, unless it's on a busy day. So, you could come in late at 6 p.m. on a medium crowd day and maybe still be able to buy Radiator Springs Racers. So maybe you just want to sort of do your individual lightning lane strategy on those days and then save the next day for really maximizing Genie Plus, especially if you have a park hopper ticket, because that's when you can knock out all 20 attractions in a single day if you don't even work that hard.
Leslie has done it, ladies and gentlemen.
I did 19 to be fair.
Yeah, and we didn't say this, but yes, the individual lightning lanes, same rules. You can't buy them until after you've entered the park. All right, well, thank you, Leslie, for giving us the 102 episode, the Disneyland 101. Okay, you know what? I need to stop with these numbers. Thank you for talking to us about the Disneyland Genie Plus things that we need to know. Let's end with our Disneyland Genie Plus do or don't. What do you have for us?
All right. Don't buy Genie Plus when you don't need it. And you already alluded to this, Joe. You might not need it on a super low crowd day, but it's really hard to find a super low crowd day at Disneyland. So, or predict what a super low crowd day is going to be in advance. So I don't really hang my hat on that. But I would say you don't need it if you have little kids, especially if you're only going to be in Disney California Adventure, because most of the attractions on Genie Plus in California Adventure are thrill rides, and you just won't get your money's worth. You can still get your money's worth if you're having a park hopper ticket with littles, but you won't get your money's worth at DCA on Genie Plus. So that's something to sort of keep in mind. That's really the only scenario where I think some groups of people won't get value out of it, is if they have people in their family who aren't necessarily riding thrill rides. And even still, even if I had a baby or toddler with me, I'd still buy it for everybody else in the family.
Yeah, and while we were talking, I was thinking that if I was on a 3 or definitely on a 4-day trip, unlike Walt Disney World, I would seriously consider not buying Genie Plus every single day, even though, I don't go to Disneyland that much, but there's so much to enjoy and to do at Disneyland, so much that Genie Plus doesn't even cover as well, that, I could do all the rides. I mean, really, my daughter and I did this. We did the majority of the rides just on one day with Genie Plus. We had Genie Plus for 2 days. On over 2 days, it's really, you're re-riding at that point, if you're doing long days at Disneyland. So if you're there on a multi-day trip, you can be picky and choosy about what days you want to use Genie Plus for, just because, that's one reason why Disneyland is so great. It's so compact, and the Genie Plus rules, it just makes things a lot easier, a lot less pressure overall on, maximizing your Genie Plus purchase, because it more or less takes care of itself.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Leslie, for giving us the ins and outs of Genie Plus at Disneyland. If you are booking a Disneyland trip, be sure to check out all the stuff Leslie has at tripswithtykes.com, and also the Disneyland with Kids Facebook group that she runs, along with some other fellow bloggers. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Other than that, Leslie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and I'll see you setting up 2 sets of alarms, Disney World version, Disneyland version.
Thanks, Joe.